Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train and welcome to E-Train Talks, where I talk everything books in the hopes to inspire others to love reading as much as I do. Today, I'm thrilled to be chatting with the award-winning middle grade author and poet, Laura Shovan, about her short story, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Bima, featured in one of my favorite new reads, Coming of Age, 13 B'NAI Mitzvah Stories, the first Jewish anthology sharing B'NAI Mitzvah stories I've ever read, and hopefully not the last. Laura, thanks so much for joining me today.
I'm so happy to talk to you, E. I'm really glad to be here and have a chance to chat about this great book.
Yeah, it really is a great book, and I'm so honored that I have the opportunity to chat with you. So, to everybody listening, here's a brief summary about Coming of Age. So, Coming of Age was such a fun and meaningful read, filled with 13 unique and entertaining stories about 13 different kids experiencing one thing in common, their Jewish bar or bat mitzvah. As someone that will be going through my own bar mitzvah in the future, I really appreciate the experiences all of the 13 different protagonists went through. But what's really nice about Coming of Age is that really all middle graders can relate to what the main characters go through. So I'm so glad you can join me on E-Train Talks, Laura, to help share more about this wonderful and needed book.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, will you share how you ended up involved in contributing your story to the Coming of Age anthology?
Yes, as you know, E, I'm a PJ Our Way author. So I had a book called Takedown that has a Jewish character and was part of the PJ Our Way program. And in 2019, I went on a trip with several other PJ Our Way authors to visit Israel. And one of the editors of this anthology, Jonathan Rosen, was also on that trip. So I was so excited when he asked me to be part of this project. I believe in what Jonathan and Henry are doing. I know that part of the proceeds of this book are going to help combat anti-Semitism, which is so important. And because there's been such a rise in anti-Semitism, especially in the United States. And so I was really excited, but I will tell you, my own bat mitzvah there was a lot of family drama at my own bat mitzvah. So I had to do a lot of work and think about my own experience before I could write my story.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a Jewish ceremony if there wasn't some family drama involved.
Correct. This is true.
So I'm so glad you were able to get involved in the B'NAI Mitzvah stories. And I really liked that you kind of made your story feel really real. Like you weren't on another planet, the planet Latka. You weren't on Noah's Ark. You kind of made it feel real and you added relevant themes like friendship. So I'm very grateful that you not only added Jewish themes, but you also added themes that you can see a lot in new middle grade novels.
Yeah, it was important to me because I want this. I mean, I think we all want kids who are not Jewish to feel welcome by this book and read the stories and enjoy them. It was important to me that my character, Danny, have some friends who, even though they're not Jewish, they understand the stress that she's feeling about her upcoming bat mitzvah. So they don't have to share her exact culture in order to understand what she's going through and how she's feeling about it. And in that way, they can be good allies to her, even though they don't share a Jewish background.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's so true. I know that a lot of people have friends and very important friends that mean a lot to them who may not share the same religion, who may not be from the same culture, but they still always stand by each other's sides and stand up for each other, despite the fact that they might celebrate different holidays, eat different foods, because it's all about coming together and accepting each other.
Exactly.
And,
I agree.
Yeah. And unfortunately, not enough people are informed or have any experience with the Jewish culture or even know what a B'NAI Mitzvah is. So can you explain a little bit about what a bar or bat mitzvah is, and what are some of the ups and downs leading up to the big day?
So I may not be the best person to ask this question because it has been such a long time since my own bat mitzvah, but basically it is a coming of age ceremony where you as a 13-year-old show that you are responsible enough to be a full part of the Jewish community. And the way you do that is by participating in the service, the Friday night, Saturday morning service, in a special way, which is that you are in charge of reading a section of the Torah scroll for the whole congregation. And that takes a lot of work and study. You know, most American kids who go to Reform temples, like I did, don't speak Hebrew. So you have to learn the Hebrew. So you're learning the meaning behind the Torah portion in Hebrew, but you also have to get comfortable with reading it out loud. And you don't just read it, you chant it. So you're learning a language, you're learning music, you're learning the religious meaning behind your Torah portion. And by doing all of that work and all of that study, that is how you're showing that you're responsible and becoming an adult member of your congregation, of the Jewish community.
Well, it makes a lot of sense that since the B'NAI Mitzvah is a coming of age ceremony, it's kind of your transition into being a member of this Jewish community. It makes sense that this novel is called Coming of Age.
Exactly.
And I think that a lot of people, they don't know really a lot about B'NAI Mitzvah. So I think that your summary kind of gives a little bit more perspective, and everybody can have different opinions about, like, I just think that a B'NAI Mitzvah is very special, and I want people to really understand what it is and why it's important. Because a lot of people treat other religions, like other ceremonies, they don't really understand how important it is, like how meaningful it is for others. So they don't really take the time to kind of understand. So I think that Coming of Age does a really good job of including Jewish themes, but also kind of making it like a safe space for both Jewish readers and also other readers who may not share the same religion and culture.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think a lot of kids who are involved with their faith have that experience where from the outside it looks like it's all about a big party.
Yeah.
And a lot of us as authors is, as you know, some of the stories talk about this directly, but we've also all talked about this. But there is a moment, even though we're all looking forward to the party, there's a moment after all of the preparation, and you will experience this someday, not too long from now, when you stand up there as a 13-year-old and your whole family and all your Hebrew school friends and all your school friends are out in the audience. And it does feel very momentous. It feels like you are doing something special, and you feel that connection back through time with all of the 13-year-olds who have gone through this experience in the past. And for me, that moment was, we're not allowed to touch the Torah scroll because it's holy. And so there's a pointer with a little hand on it, and it's usually gold or golden, and it's called a yad. And there was something about that moment for me. I didn't put it in my story because for reasons, but that moment of holding the yad and just reflecting on the idea that this book is so important that we don't touch it with our fingers, and all of the people who might have held this pointer before me, that was the thing that sticks in my mind, the detail that sticks in my mind of this being a very special thing that I was doing in the moment that I was doing it. And so all these many years later, that's what I really remember as the sort of that moment where my brain went, oh, this is really something magical. Shouldn't say magical. Magical is not the right word. Momentous.
Yeah, and I can't wait for my moments when I have my B'NAI Mitzvah, my Bar Mitzvah, holding the yad, going up at the bima, and just kind of chanting my heart out. And I think that it can feel like a momentous occasion, but it can also feel daunting. Like, it's like you're basically doing something that so many people have done before you and so many people are going to do after you. So it can feel daunting, but I think that it's also just like an occasion. It's so memorable. It's momentous, it's memorable. There are so many different adjectives to describe it. And I think that your novel does a really good job of, like, the entire coming of age novel and your short story. It does a really good job of kind of bringing it back down to earth, like, because a lot of people say like it's the most amazing thing that's happened to them. But for kids, a lot of people don't remember that for kids, when they were kids, it might have been a super scary experience. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going in front of all these people. Or when it's 2 weeks before the big day, oh my gosh, I haven't started my speech.
Right.
So it can feel like a really scary experience. But like you said, it's momentous. And once it's over with, you're going to feel really good about yourself. And you're becoming a part of an important community. You're doing something important.
Exactly. And I thank you for bringing that up. That, the theme of my story is about a girl who, although she's comfortable reading from the Torah scroll, because there's a script, but for the speech she's going to give with her bat mitzvah ceremony, that is all on her. She has to write the words of that speech and make it, and there's nobody there to correct her if she makes a misstep. And so hilariously, I hope, she asks everybody she knows for a bit of advice about her speech. And one person's advice is more outlandish than the next. Next thing you know, she's spinning circles and flushing ice cubes down the toilet.
Well, it's certainly a silly experience and a silly short story, but also a very meaningful one. And I'm so grateful that you wrote it and that you were a part of the coming of age story. So your short story is one of the only ones in the coming of age anthology set in the present day. The protagonist, Danny, hasn't started her bat mitzvah speech yet, and the big day is coming up fast, so she looks for help from her non-Jewish friends. But along the way, encounters many twists and turns on her way to the Bima. So were there any similarities between your bat mitzvah experience and Danny's?
It's so funny. Like I said earlier, there was a lot of drama around my own bat mitzvah. And I think that although in the end, everything worked out okay, because it has a way of doing that, I, at the time that I was 13, didn't feel like I was getting the help that I needed, at least not in the beginning, in order to study and do a good job. So I kind of, with this story, because I wanted to make it funny, I went in the totally opposite direction, where Danny is getting too much help and isn't really relying on herself. So I would say I went from, no help and not feeling like I was getting the support I needed, to a character who's so overwhelmed with help and support that it's actually making her more stressed out.
Yeah, and so there may be your story might be like nearly completely opposite to Danny's, but it's also kind of similar. You're both kind of stressed, and you incorporated yourself into your characters, which I love seeing in novels, because when an author incorporates their experiences into their main character or one of the characters involved, it really adds more depth to a story. And the reader kind of gets pulled in even more because the author knows from experience what's going on. And that's why I really love anthologies, realistic fiction, just because it kind of feels so real. Like you're on the Bima, sharing your speech and kind of putting yourself out there along with the character.
Yeah, I love that. And I love to write realistic fiction. I will say that one of the things I always do when I'm writing realistic fiction is I do interviews. So for this story, short as it is, I interviewed a family who, this was during the height of the pandemic. So they had a Zoom mitzvah during the pandemic, which the bar mitzvah boy was nervous, like Danny is in the story. And so doing his bar mitzvah over Zoom was actually really helpful for him because he felt less put on the spot. And I also interviewed a rabbi who does a lot of tutoring with kids, and she helps me a ton with this story. But when I do interviews, it helps me get those little details that make a story feel more realistic.
Yeah, and that's why it's called realistic fiction, because the characters might be fictional, but the experiences are realistic. They are real. And also, my cousin actually, who's very close to me, he went to our house. So it was a very fun experience. So it was during the height of COVID. He wasn't able to do his bar mitzvah for over a year. It was delayed by a year. And then on the day when he was doing it on Zoom, there was a power outage at his house, and he had to bring all of his stuff over to my house. And it can always be really hectic. But like you said, it just always turns out really special, and it's always going to turn out good. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one of the other authors, Melissa Roski, talks about that actually in her story. She talks about the idea that the B'NAI Mitzvah doesn't necessarily have to look like everybody else's. It can look like Zoom. It can look like going to your cousin's house because that's what is necessary that day. It can look like just having a private ceremony in your rabbi's office. And I really love Melissa's story for that reason, exactly as you say, because it reminds us to be flexible, and that it's the engaging with the words of the Torah as B'NAI Mitzvah, that's the important piece. And all of the other pieces can move around, change, adapt as they need to.
Yeah, that is so true. And it leads me to my next question. So I'm always I'm always looking for Jewish book recommendations. And while there unfortunately aren't many, I'm always ready to jump on an opportunity when I find one. So do you have any recommendations?
I am ready for this question. I really had to think about it, but the one that came to mind is this. It is a graphic novel, Passover Haggadah. And as soon as I saw this was out, I knew I had to buy. Actually bought 2 copies. And this is the Haggadah that my family used this year for our Passover Seder. And my whole family really enjoyed it. We had a great time using this Haggadah for our Seder this year. Yeah, I don't even know what to say about it. It's just like really engaging. If you're a graphic novel person, it's great. My family is interfaith, so there are some people in the family who are less familiar with the stories that we tell on Passover, and having the illustrations alongside the prayers in English and in Hebrew, it just made our Seder extra special this year.
That sounds like such a fun experience. I'll have to look into the graphic novel Haggadah. And because it's always pretty, there's a lot of commotion when it comes to Passover here.
Always.
So I think that might really help. While we've done it many times before, we always find ourselves in pretty hilarious situations. And I think that the making it a graphic novel was such a fun idea, and I really want a copy of it.
I totally agree. It's just I don't even know how. You know what it is? Here's part of what I love about it. Doing it as a graphic novel allowed the authors and illustrators to do things like in parts of the story when the Haggadah talks about Jews leaving Egypt and enslavement, there are images in the graphic novel. There are illustrations of things like what's going on in Ukraine and other parts of history, just to show the connection not only with Jewish people but people around the world who are enslaved or oppressed. And to me, it just drove home how important it is to keep telling this story, because it's a story that keeps repeating itself in our society.
Yeah, I think that that's so beautiful, and finding similarities between certain like relevant topics, because a lot of people don't really know the Jewish story, like our heritage, our culture. So kind of comparing its similarities to a really relevant topic like Ukraine or other different wars or battles or anything really, I think it can be extremely helpful. And I need to get my hands on a copy of that graphic novel. I think it'd be so great to share with my family. And I think I honestly really appreciate that recommendation. And I think that I'm thrilled. I think that'll help us a lot.
We, like I said, we had a great time with it. And yeah, I know there are families who collect many different versions of Haggadot. And we've been using the same boring one for a really long time. So this just made it extra exciting and fun to tell the Passover story this year.
That sounds like so much fun. And that leads me to my next question. So this is unfortunately our final question of the day. So if this is a question I ask all my guests, and I always enjoy hearing the different answers and just learning more about the authors themselves, because I think that the answers all really kind of tell a story in themselves. So, if you could be or meet any literary character, fictional or real, from any time period, who would it be and why?
All right, so I picked one that I love so much. And this is who I would be. And I was thinking about being 13, because this is a book about a 13-year-old who's also going through a coming of age. And it is the new translation of the Japanese novel Kiki's Delivery Service, which many people may know from Studio Ghibli. It's a very famous anime. And I would love to have been Kiki at age 13. In this story, Kiki is a young girl who's about to turn 13, and her mother's a witch. And because Kiki is also a witch who's coming of age, in her culture, that means she has to leave home and fly off and find a town who needs a witch. And as a witch, she's going to use her powers. She only has one power, and that's the power of flight. So she has to come up with a business or a way to support herself as a witch with her power of flight. And as you can tell from the title, the business she comes up with is a delivery service. And I love this story because Kiki, all along, her parents are a little unsure. They're not sure she's old enough. And all along, she's very confident. Now, when she actually moves away from her family and moves to a really big town, she has moments where she's feeling a little less self-assured, but she always believes in herself. And I love her adventures and the fact that this is a 13-year-old who, not only in her own mind, but her whole culture is supporting the idea that she can be independent and live on her own, running this business based on her powers as a witch. And have you ever seen the movie?
I have not.
Oh my gosh. Movie is great. The book is great. Highly recommend it. It's one of those movies and books that just when I'm maybe feeling a little sad, that's one of the ones that I would go to for a pick-me-up.
Thanks so much for the recommendation. And it sounds like such a thrilling coming of age story. And also, I find that it seems really interesting in a way that a lot of cultures might, as you know, there have been a lot of witch stories where people accuse people of being witches and think that it's a bad thing. But I guess in that culture, in the story at least, they kind of accept who she is, and they find ways to utilize her and help her. So I think that that's also another great addition to the anime, which I need to see. Thanks so much for the recommendation. And the story, the cover, and just the title itself. Well, I don't like judging books by their covers. That's a beautiful cover. I can't wait to read it.
Well, I hope you enjoy it, and let me know what you think after you have a chance to watch the movie and read the book.
I will definitely let you know what I think. And thanks so much for joining me today. My guest today, everybody, has been Laura Shovan, author and poet, as well as one of the many great authors with short stories featured in the Coming of Age anthology. Laura, thanks so much for joining me. Your answer.
Sorry, I was going to say it was an honor. I'm so excited to tell you how much fun this was that I'm talking over you. Forgive me.
It's okay. Thank you so much. I'm just glad that I had the opportunity to talk with you. And to all of you listening, to find out more about Laura, be sure to check out her Twitter at Laura Shovan, LauraShovan, and her website, laurashovan.com. And that's all for now, everybody. As always, stay safe and happy reading.